All right, I'll let you know when we're live here. Okay, I think we're live. Hey everybody, it's SMQ and this is kind of a last minute thing and I just wanted to get this down and have it for the channel and for everyone else because the document, which I've also included, this is part two of that mini series I was talking about. The CIA document that I was talking about in part one of this was covered by the Kev Baker show on Truth Frequency Radio. And I got an honorable mention, which was thank you very much, Kev Baker, if you happen to listen to this or his crew. And I've just got a feeling that the way in which it was covered, and I have that on my Twitter feed, and then I also added it to my communities tab here on YouTube, so you can go check it out for yourself. And any way you want to support Truth Frequency, even just you listening helps. But I've got a feeling that we could be looking at a watershed moment for not just MEs, but really a greater understanding of our place in the world and our understanding as well as our relationship with our own government. And there's a lot of things and a lot of cross currents here. And I have the pleasure to have the person that found this document, probably one of the finest researchers I've ever come across. It's Buster 1978 with me. Buster, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And I wanna thank you, and I want to thank everybody watching right now. We already have 21 watching. Thank you for coming on at just like this, Buster. And I know it was literally last minute, but once I heard Kev Baker talk about this, and he was putting it in the way in which Chick and I, as well as me again, we were putting it because we understood what we were looking at and what and the fact that it comes from CIA.gov. This wasn't some sort of third party that's being leaked. This is actually coming from the CIA website itself. Just leads to it validates it even more. So
Yeah,
I don't know what are,
absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. The thing I find interesting about the document is that it does take a while to go through, and then the interesting thing is that it's only 28 pages. Now, for most things, 28 pages, most people could probably get through that fairly quickly, but this document took me a long time to get through, even though it was very short.
Yeah, that's one thing about, I was saying is this is my third video on YouTube, and then I have my regular show on Truth Frequency Radio. And I've been earnestly going through the document since I would say Friday probably. And it's now Tuesday. It's 29 pages, and I can guarantee you I've not fully understood the ramifications of what I've read. And your first read through, you just simply can't read through it. It's so powerful because it's a redefinition of the nature of our existence and our understanding of that existence. And never mind the absolute purposes from which the CIA, you've got to get through that before you even begin to understand what the CIA is even trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. After a while, once you get near the end, sort of the ideas behind why they were researching this sort of kind of come into play. But in the beginning, no, it's the way they describe some of these things in such clarity, but briefness. They'll explain something to such depth, but they won't actually go any further. They'll just kind of move on to the next point. Like they'll cover it quickly, but in depth, and then they'll just move on to the next point. And that's what I found very intriguing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I mentioned. It shows, if you're an experienced reader, if you've read a lot of books and you've read a lot of research material, you can understand that if someone can encapsulate something so powerful and something that would be very voluminous or whatever, if they can encapsulate that in a paragraph or less, there's been a lot of research, a lot of study, and you can infer a lot of information from the author and the organization from which the author is representing. And just the fact that they can encapsulate that the universe is a hologram, the brain is in fact a hologram, and it's oscillation. And I know I don't say it very often, so someone corrected me with that, and I had to listen back to it because, well, frankly don't say that very often. I say variable a lot. I say doing IT work, but I don't say oscillation very often. So yes, I know the S is silent. I didn't catch myself doing that, probably because I don't say it often. I was bowled over. So I understand everyone who commented on that. But anyway, this document is so powerful. It's the most powerful 29 pages I've ever read in my entire life because it absolutely reshaped everything. And really, a lot of the conspiracies that haunted me or bothered me, they've almost fall to the wayside when you read something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it touches upon so many different subjects, but the focus of those subjects isn't necessarily the purpose of the document. The purpose of the document is basically just to assess the gateway process. But in order to do so, you can tell they had to do so much amount of research just to get to that assessment, just to be able to come to a conclusion.
Absolutely. And let's talk just briefly. We can go back and forth or whatever it may be, or we can make this a shorter, whatever conversation we want to do with this. But, let's talk briefly about that conclusion. The conclusion is quite startling, where they talk about basically this kind of three-party system that sort of leads a secondary party where they talk about, quote, the target, which seems to be maybe somebody that they want to, you know, put under surveillance for, whatever reasons that people get under surveillance, for law enforcement or for other reasons. You know, I, they have someone in the past, they have someone in the present, and they have someone in the immediate future watching to
Yep.
sort of surveil someone in a way that is absolutely so unconventional, but it also can explain a lot to where how often, if you are on the radar of a government organization, a lot of people think that there's these other kinds of technologies that may possibly be out there. And this goes a long way into explaining that if indeed they have taken this particular gateway process and they have, in some way, somehow, some fashion, have implemented this, not just in a beta test, but have fully rolled this out into a production environment, that indeed this would go far into explaining those that you make their radar, and indeed they can sort of almost do a minority report type thing where they can stop you just before you commit the crime, or as you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. After finishing kind of the conclusion where you kind of gain the idea of why they were researching this, it brings up a lot of questions as to, you think, okay, how far did they actually take this? Did they actually create a program where they've got people who are doing this gateway process, or was this something where they didn't think it was feasible? It raises a lot of questions where you go, now I wonder, right?
Well, yeah, and that's just the thing, is there's so much, it seems as if, you know, if you look around the world and the way in which the conspiracy world is constructed, or you look around the world and you see the way the clandestine world seems to be working, or even mainstream law enforcement seems to be working, I've noticed, I've been on the earth long enough that I remember barely the 80s, but I certainly remember the 90s up until now. And it seems as if the world is much calmer, and in an odd way to say that. And I say that in American cities they used to. And I briefly lived in New York City when I was younger, and I can remember it being hyper violent, hyper dangerous. And I can remember other cities, even the one that I ended up living in, which was a relatively small American city, but nonetheless it was a city. And even that, my father having to, once he got out of the Navy, having to work downtown, even that was something that was a bit of a challenge. Um, so, and that those kinds of atmospheres abruptly changed, and it makes you kind of wonder in a way, obviously there's the visible law enforcement tools that they have, and there's obviously profiling, mainstream profiling that's flaunted in the media with dangerous criminals and the like, but also it could explain the rise and fall serial killers. It could explain the rise and fall of all kinds of different things that, when I was a kid, it seemed that it was only going to get worse. It's almost to the point of a dystopian nightmare. And it all seemed to have gone away. Now, for a long time, I know other people have, before reading this document, they assumed perhaps, they assumed that, hold on, I've got of course, McAfee is giving me a virus thing. Hopefully we don't get shut down here. Um, that right? They assumed that it was, part of a broader program or something. But now reading this document, perhaps something like this was rolled out. So indeed, if you had someone who was, you couldn't prove that they were, doing something, some skullduggery that you couldn't prove, that if you could read all the way through and you come to that conclusion that indeed you'd have these enhanced tools to find them
Mhm.
and stop it and shut it down much faster. And it is interesting. I do find that fascinating that those kinds of waves of things sort of dissipated. And 83 is when it came out, 2000, and obviously by the time that it came out in 2003, this particular document, we're talking about, they must have so mastered it in that 20 years, perhaps.
Yeah, if they actually did start a program using this gateway process for information gathering purposes or espionage or whatever it was that they were planning on doing with it, it even just blows my mind when they get to that point where they're like, "Yeah, we think we could possibly use this to look into the past, to look into the future, and gain information that way." Where the ramifications of that in particular are just astounding.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So, so where does this? I mean, we have the universe is the hologram, our brain is a hologram. Um, Time indeed is something that is not only measured, is something that ultimately can be, if not outright manipulated, is something that can be traversed like you would, walking across a room. We have remote viewing. We have this sort of astral uh body kind of, I don't know what, what's your takeaway from this in terms of the process itself and the conclusions that it's drawn? You've had this longer than I have. So what are your takeaways? I'm just curious, you're a relatively, informed guy when it comes to all things like this, but this document in particular. So
So
what,
it's
yeah.
such a broad topic because, like, even in the beginning page where the guy is describing to his boss, basically, he's saying that he's had to delve into quantum mechanics and theoretical physics, basically stuff which he's probably not familiar with, basically just to explain what is the gateway process. And he's touching upon so many different subjects. There's that section where they talk about particle physics. There's that section where he brings up the torus. Now, these aren't like simple concepts if you're not familiar with them. If you are familiar with them, you can kind of have an idea of what he's talking about. But in general, it seems like they really thought this was feasible at some point, this whole gateway process of syncing the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere to create identical frequencies in both sides and in frequency and amplitude. So that basically creates an altered state of consciousness. Now, the point they were getting to with the Planck's distance, with the 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, I think it is. So
Mhm.
what they're saying there is that if your brain frequency, if you look at it on an oscilloscope, the point where it goes from up to down is the point where it's at rest, where it changes direction. So what they're saying is that, say if you measure the distance from the point where it is at the top, it goes all the way down and then it comes all the way back up again. They're saying if you take the distance between either the top or the bottom, and if you measure it, if it gets smaller than 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, it's beyond Planck's distance, and you're basically clicking out of time space. And for whatever reason, they believe that they must have had evidence at the point to suggest that people were already doing this at some point under observation, and that once these people had gotten to that point, they were able to click out of normal reality and have access to information outside of normal means. So that in and of itself is not only fantastic, but they were looking at ways to try to gain information or basically have access to something which isn't normally possible. And they used all of this science to suggest that not only is it possible, but people were actually doing this.
That's what I'm, that's what I'm getting at. It seems as if this is absolutely something that was, I just have the feeling that this is something that's out there. And even if they decided to not roll out something like this or roll it out in part, what about the research itself? What you're talking about, the way in which the mind works, the point which we click out, all of those things, all of those things are spoken in the affirmative. It's
Yes.
not spoken. Yeah, exactly. And that's what, a lot of people, in not a lot of people, but some people in the comments section talked about, where I was speaking about it in the affirmative, but I was only speaking about it in the affirmative was because the CIA or the Department of the Army was speaking as if this is fact. This is
Well,
not me supposing. This is actual fact according to them.
yeah, you can tell like the whole kind of feeling throughout the document isn't whether or not to investigate whether or not these theories or what they're explaining is possible. They're just looking at it like, yes, it's possible. The point being, we want to find out whether this is feasible or not. You can tell like throughout the whole document, that's kind of like their goal, just in the way that they've worded things, like, yes, we know that time is this and that, and yes, we know that, all of these things are interacting and that the universe is a hologram. But what we really want to know is whether or not this is actually feasible to do or not.
Exactly, right? It's like all of those things are so like passe to them. They're like,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
they
yes.
just say it in such a casual fashion, and they don't even go into great depth. They explain it in good detail, but they don't dwell on, okay, well, the universe is a hologram. We're going to spend 5 pages explaining that. They just give like one little paragraph and they move on to the next topic. That's what I
Right.
found very jarring about it.
And that's just it, is they know their audience, and they're only bringing this up to their audience as, oh, by the way, put this in context with what we're talking about. It's like, this is already settled. Not only is this affirmative, this is settled. And if you guys remember when we did that crazy thing where we proved to you that the existence is a hologram, and we were able to make things appear and disappear out of existence in front of you to prove it. In case you forgot that, by the way, I just thought I'd bring that up again. That's the feeling I got from the
Yeah,
tone from the author.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like, they've got everything condensed into one paragraph for one type of topic. And, if you wanted to research that topic, they've probably got material elsewhere that would describe it in greater detail. That's the feeling that I got.
Now, and another thing too that they mention in here rather casually, and they do it about 3 or 4 different times. They do the topic of the absolute, which we can talk about, which indeed is, to me, seems as almost as if it's like God or something that is a being. Is that what you're coming away with?
Yeah, kind of in a sense. The way they kind of describe it is more in terms of energy. So
Okay.
there's energy at rest, and then there's energy in motion. And the feeling that I got out of it was that energy in motion is everything that's contained inside of the hologram that we're currently experiencing. And anything that's energy not in motion is basically energy at rest, which can't experience the hologram, which is outside of time space and outside of the hologram, but still exists basically outside. When they say click out, basically you're in that phase where you're interacting with energy kind of not in motion. That was the understanding that I got.
Now, before I get into magic wands, someone mentioned in the comments section, I thought this was kind of interesting. Do you think that they released this without any fanfare because of the the karmic law of blowback, where if you sort of give someone the tools to understand exactly what's being done to them, the idea in some forms of the occult world, that that's also like with the predictive programming and the way in which people have accused Hollywood or the entertainment industry of certain things, that by showing people what's going to happen to them or what's being done to them, and they acquiesce, even if it's in something of a subconscious state, that you've released all sort of karmic blowback.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right.
Is it possible that this document is part of that? It's possible. I don't think that was the intention behind the document.
Okay.
Um, just because of the style that it's written in, I don't feel like that's why they did it. Is it possible that they could have released it in order to do that? Yes, I'm not going to dispute that, but the overall feeling that I get is that it was just done as like what it says, that it's an assessment. Like certain topics are just covered very briefly and they don't go into great detail, but the overall attitude of the whole document is just everything is there's a purpose for this sentence, there's a purpose for that paragraph, and then it just moves on. Like
Yeah.
it basically the whole thing just wants to get to the conclusion.
And I'm going to read this brief paragraph. It's from page 21, section D. It talks about the energy bar tool. And I'm doing this for the purposes of the audience to kind of entice them to read this through, because the way in which they weave, and this goes back to the expert way, this author must be commended, but the expert way that they can weave disparate things would take great fiction is on contrast, and great art thrives on contrast, and drama, and this author certainly took that to this document is, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of what the strict meaning of art is, which is to make you reassess your environment and produce something beautiful from nothing. I think, to me, in a lot of ways, this document is a work of art. But I want to read from page 21, section D, Energy Bar Tool. And it says here, unironically, it says, magic wands and enchanted scepters have been part of the folklore and occult practices of many cultures. The scepters, staffs, and maces carried by monarchs and high priests alike occur with such frequency in the history of bygone eras as to suggest that, at the very least, these items are aspects of some type of archetypal symbol which the human mind seems to appreciate, perhaps quite subliminally. In any case, the energy tool technique involves, and is that envisioning a
In
small, what is that?
envisaging.
Envisaging. It's an odd word. There's some of these words I don't come across very often. A small, intensely pulsating dot of light, which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he then uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for purposes of healing and revitalization. There's so much packed into that small,
Yeah.
tiny paragraph there. We could probably spend a couple of days on it.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to weave so many of those things. One, we're talking about taking occult and meditative practices in the affirmative, the way it's speaking, as if it is fact, and speaking in a manner to describe how it's done so. Because I'm certainly from the New Age and the occult background here. I'm certainly familiar, and indeed have to certain extents participated in these kinds of visual exercises. So, and then to speak about magic wands and scepters, and it makes you think about monarchs, even modern day monarchs and modern day figures of, especially in Europe, figures of authority. And you think of the scepter and where it sits in parliament and things like that. And you're just, it really does pull in the Jungian ideas of the archetype. And all of these things are just smashed together, and just good old fashioned what someone would consider hocus pocus. It's all pulled together into just an extraordinary paragraph. And I'm just wondering, when you read that and you ingested that, what were your thoughts?
So, like I said before, the style in which it's written, like that whole paragraph isn't very long. And then they describe all of these things within that paragraph where they're talking about magic wands and enchanted scepters. Like, if you didn't know where this document originated, you might be forgiven for thinking that you're reading a book on New Age something or other.
Mm-hmm.
But since it's from the DoD, there's kind of like a disparity there. Like, they're talking about magic wands and enchanted scepters, but you're like, okay, you have to take this seriously just because of the source of where this is coming from. And then they right after that, they just move on to remote viewing. They don't give any explanation or any validation. They don't expect you to believe it. They just kind of move right on. And every paragraph in this document has a reason for being in it. So the energy bar tool kind of reminded me of the biofeedback part section at the beginning of the document.
Yes.
Where they're talking about how there's this technique that they say where the left brain can kind of enter a demand mode to the right brain where it wants to demand something. And like it said, you can even get to the point where you could even remove a tumor from the body.
Yes.
And I think the example that they gave was that if the left brain wants to, say, speed up healing in the left leg, what it would do is it would send this demand signal to the right brain, where it wants to, say, increase the circulation in the leg to speed up the healing. Now, what they would do is they would have the person wear like a device that would measure the temperature in their body. And once that temperature increases, then they know that the signal that's being sent from the left brain to the right brain is actually correct. And through repeated exercise, that strengthens the ability for the left brain to connect to the right brain and get the desired result.
Yes.
And that kind of reminds me of that, where they're saying you can actually alter your body in such a way that isn't normally possible. And using these magic wands and enchanted scepters, you would think that that's totally unbelievable. But the way they describe it, you're like, okay, well, there has to be some kind of scientific basis for what they're saying. Otherwise, that wouldn't even be in there at all.
And that's just
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Please go on. I'm sorry.
I remember reading through the document. There was so many times where, like I think you said, you had to just stop and put it down for a few minutes, just because of like the stuff they were saying. You're just like, wow, like I have to take a break, kind of digest what they're saying, and then kind of go back to it.
Now, one thing too that's sort of woven in there, like you were talking about the biofeedback, that's sort of woven in there, and ultimately you realize the power of the mind indeed isn't just some cliche that someone would put up in their cube to make sure that they have a good day or whatever it may be. It is in fact something that's almost limitless because it is indeed a hologram. But one of the things that I know that they've sprinkled in here in another matter-of-fact way, as if anyone reading this has obviously been briefed on this already, this idea of not only there being other entities or intelligences in these states, not only that there has to be teams, Focus 12 state, Focus 15, and they talk about these different teams whenever you conduct an operation that have to be out there in order to ensure that if there are entities or intelligences, as they put it, that are encountered during this process, that you indeed have almost like a recon team or a forward team, brace the other individuals that are actually out of body and to kind of reel them in safely away from these particular intelligences. I mean, what's your take from that after reading this?
Yeah, it seems like the way that this whole thing was set up was that so they could practice in teams. For what reason, other than what you just mentioned, is not entirely clear. They don't exactly say that in the document. Probably just for the safety of the individual, would be my guess. Like I said, they do say that they do kind of expect sooner or later that someone's probably going to come across an entity. They don't say exactly where, whether it be in this dimension or another dimension, but they do say at some point they expect the person going through this gateway process to come across an entity, and that in and of itself raises a lot of questions, because you think, okay, well, what kind of entity? They're not really specific on that, so you kind of start thinking, well, what could that possibly be?
And the way in which they're talking about that, it's obviously happened before, the way in which they come across these intelligences or these entities, the fact that there has to be almost like different kinds of teams to triangulate, it's almost as if they are carrying it out. It's almost as it's like psychic warfare, that they're carrying it out as if it's a military operation. So that, for me at least, and maybe I could be completely off base, I imply from that if it's not outright hostility, they're whatever it is they're coming across will probably be, if not hostile, it certainly wouldn't be happy that they're there interfering in whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
might
I mean,
seem like a stranger in a strange land, so to speak.
yeah, like, what are you doing here? This is, sort of
Yeah,
our
you're not supposed to be here kind of type attitude.
It is. It's odd. It's very odd. And then just the fact that, he says it right in the beginning, about the stigma of the occult connotations. I mean, this is one of the most occult documents I've ever read in my entire life. I'm going to be honest with you. This could be a grimoire as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what I find fascinating too is that I wasn't going into this document expecting to find anything that would relate it at all to the Mandela effect. I kind of briefly glanced through it, and I kind of just read the topics of what they were talking about. I saw like the consciousness matrix and the subatomic particles they were describing, and I was looking at some of the diagrams. And I was like, okay, well, this looks interesting. I'm not really sure if it's got anything to do with the Mandela effect, but it does look interesting. So once I kind of got into it after the first few pages, I kind of just devoured the whole thing in about 4 or 5 hours. It was just, I was blown away.
Wow, you were able. Wow, well, good on you. You really are. Okay. This took me, I guess, because I was so stunned. It took me days because I kept highlighting and going over it, and I would put it down and stare at it from across the room and eat a sandwich and look at it and then walk back over and just go over it again. And it was just so powerful, the document, and it frankly freaked me out. It really freaked me out. And it wasn't as if, I don't mean to say it freaked me out like I ran out into the street like a madman with my shirt off. I mean, it's a lot to take in at once. And I think,
Yeah, it's not the fact that I think that like these topics are brand new or these ideas or concepts are brand new. I think what's so shocking is that they kind of combine all of these various ideas and concepts, talk about it in such a brief manner, and then just completely move on to the next topic, and then kind of just leave you there hanging, like you're just sitting there shaking your head, going, "Did they just say that?"
yeah, and that's well said. I just realized what you just, everything I read in here, I've heard of already in some fashion, in some way. I've already heard of all of this. It's just the fact that it's the CIA. It was the fact that it's the Department of the Army. At the time, they maybe could have considered this classified forever. So I think they were speaking among like minds. I think they were very comfortable. The author was very comfortable with his audience, obviously. They were very comfortable with these topics. And it was as if, it was something that was probably going to be kept under wraps. And I think, that the fact that a lot of this has been sort of, and I say, it's like, I don't want to say weaponized because I don't want to come off like I'm hostile to the people who put this together. But, other than corporatized, I'm looking for a word to add to this because they've taken a lot of woo woo or new age or occult or hermetic practices or whatever it may be. And they've put it all together, and they've put this sheen over it that's very almost like a corporate spec that you would read to implement a project. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's written in a very clinical fashion.
Yeah. the nature of existence very clinically, and magic wands, and coming across intelligences and other dimensions, and how to handle forward teams and different kinds of teams, and to pull people out in this sort of combat formation out of this other plane of existence. And then you've got to wonder, then, are there other teams? Excuse me for 1 minute. I wasn't expecting this, but 1 second.
Mhm.
But while I'm answering, can you talk to me about the out of body experience?
Yeah, so the out of body experience, it seems like the way they describe it in the book is that so once a person reaches an altered state of consciousness, the way they describe it is that first this person must sync with the magnetic field of the Earth. And there's a certain stage where I think they refer to it as a certain focus number. I can't remember off the top of my head. But after the person's reached this certain stage of consciousness, they can basically move anywhere around the world,
Yeah.
out of their body, of course. And there's even a stage beyond that, like I said, where they're clicking out of this realm entirely. But it seems like the out of body movement, they're limited to this planet. That's what I've got out of that.
I did. I got that too, but I also got it that it was almost like instantaneous.
Yeah, there's the one reference where they make in there where I think they said they were talking about telepathy,
Yeah.
and they made that very specific reference where they said this energy can basically penetrate anything. It can travel around the entire world in like 1/7 of a second. All this other stuff where they're saying the brain has to be at a certain frequency, and then this is possible.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure if the out of body movement that they're talking about is identical to astral travel or not, but they don't really mention that. It's hard to say whether it is or it isn't, but it does sound very similar.
Well, one thing I can say for sure is that this document is a watershed moment in all of French culture, all conspiracy culture, and I urge everyone to take a look at it and to ingest it, because it is absolutely it will rearrange most everyone's thinking. And like I said, it's so self-evident about the Mandela effect, because they were talking about, even if you shatter pieces of the hologram, the entirety, it's almost like how, like, Bitcoin works. The entirety of the ledger of existence, and every piece that you cut out of the hologram or shatter the hologram, it remains within each of those pieces, the entirety of existence.
Mm-hmm.
All, no matter how many ways you slice it, will always remain within that, meaning you can't remove the one piece. There's always the idea that we have of size and shape doesn't really apply when it comes into dimensions of the hologram, the hologramic, universe, and the electric universe. I mean, I'm thinking of the electric universe. I'm thinking of everything that Tesla said. I'm thinking of every out there conspiracy theory out there with lizard people, the whole thing. I mean, all of this could be, either a hologram, or real, or, because they don't get into the entities, what they're
No.
talking about,
One thing where they really made a specific reference was in regards to the hologram. They said that yes, the whole is represented in the smaller parts, and it's a fractal, and this, and that kind of thing's nothing new. But what they said specifically was that the smaller piece of the hologram that you have, yes, the entire picture is encoded in there, but the picture is fuzzier the smaller you get. The bigger it is, the clearer it is, which I found was
Yes.
interesting.
And thank you for that. Yes, thank you for, yes, that's the way it was said. Absolutely. So could it be what we're experiencing with the Mandela effect is that we're actually in one of those pieces that's a bit more fuzzy? So something was shattered or broken, and we could potentially be in a piece of that fractal that is actually a subset of the larger piece. And what we're seeing, we're in that fuzzy part. So therefore, our past and all of the we think is real, it's sort of fuzzy, and that's why you have things like the Mandela effect. Well, I mean, that's where I think one of the myriad of ways the Mandela effect could apply here could be used.
That is a possibility. I can't really rule that out at this point. It's like I said, the amount of things that they touch upon in this document, you could apply it to so many different things, not only the Mandela effect, but you could apply it to so many other things that were previously unexplainable.
Yeah, I think this is almost the source for everything in terms of any kind of paranormal phenomena. I mean, we've got everything here. I mean, seriously, with it encapsulated in 29 pages, this could be the source document of all of the occult world, the paranormal world, um, everything from TV ghost hunters to, and yeah, the way in which ghosts are described, they are absolutely holograms that are repeating over and over again on some sort of oscillating loop. Am I wrong? I mean, you totally could get that out of there, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, with the way they've described it is you could apply so many of those concepts to the paranormal and they would all work.
All of it. All of it would work. And I had the feeling, I had a hunch the Mandela effect absolutely would take me down where it would solve everything in term. I knew the Mandela effect had to do with ghosts and the paranormal and all of those things. And really it was just a matter of being able to form your own language. And I think that again, it's because it's the CIA, it's the Department of Defense, the Army, all of that why this is so important a document is because who it's coming from matters. And I understand that. I always say, and for a minute I felt guilty, but I said forget this is important, that take your own authority for yourself. You don't have to rely and get permission. But I got to tell you, when we've been swinging in the dark and knowing we were so close and so right, and you've got a document where they were doing presumably, because just the fact that they say in the affirmative that the existence is a hologram, that existence and our minds are a hologram, and that matter and it doesn't exist. All it is moving oscillating energy. Everything we were saying was right. We could even go back to my 2012 series, and in a lot of ways, that could absolutely be right. I mean, everything from Nessie to Bigfoot, anything that you want to look for, you could find in this document. It's an absolute, either, I don't know, it's either a Pandora's box or a panacea, however you want to see it.
Yeah, it's however you want to see it because it does answer a lot of questions in certain ways. It also does bring up certain questions in certain ways too, though.
Like, what's the biggest thing that you're still, because you've had a lot more time with it than I do. Now that, let me ask you this. How long have you been ruminating on this thing? How long have you had this thing in your life? And what?
Just before Christmas. Just before
Okay.
Christmas. I only had it a couple of months. I printed it off, I think this first or second day that I downloaded it. And like I said, I kind of briefly glanced through it. I kind of looked at it. I didn't know if it was related to the Mandela effect or not. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll probably get to that at some point. And then it was just sitting there and just sitting there. So it was some random Sunday. I was like, okay, I'm going to read it today. Like it or not, I'm just going to get through this whole thing. And yeah, it blew me away.
So, okay. Has it changed your life?
It's changed my perspective a great deal. I mean, I tend to take a lot of things with a grain of salt, and I'm kind of a healthy skeptic in the regards where even though this thing is a fantastic document, I kind of still remain a little bit skeptic on some level. Like I don't want to give all of my energy to this document in the sense that I completely believe it, but I don't completely disbelieve it either. There's a lot of very good things in this document. I do want to say that, though, there is a possibility that this document might not be entirely valid if we were to, say, bring it back to Sagittarius, arm of the galaxy. This document might only be valid here in Orion. It might not be completely valid back in Sagittarius, where we obviously know things were different, right? Periodic
Absolutely.
table. The periodic table was different in Sagittarius. Many of the Mandela affected people know that, right? Like, until I got here in Orion, I didn't know what Californium was or Einsteinium was, right? So
Absolutely.
physics here might be slightly different than the physics where we come from. So this document might only explain the happenings here in Orion.
But in an odd way, though, even that matters because Sagittarius, then, even with it, if it's its own hologram, obviously it could have its own properties and its own way of doing things, and in a lot of ways it makes it even odder. Did we skip not just what we perceived as Sagittarius going over to Orion? did we skip into from hologram to another hologram, and that's why we're having such a difficult time sort of kind of fitting in, because so to speak our holograms are not exactly we're not vibing, quite literally we're not vibing with this existence here.
Yeah, it like I said, it brings up a lot of interesting questions. It does answer some, but at the end of the day, it's still there's still going to be some new questions raised.
I mean, I think this is one of these kinds of documents where I think people could be talking about this an entire um I think entire ways of thinking. I don't want to say cults, but entire belief systems could be um, built upon this 129-page document. This document is probably the most important document that has come out, certainly ever, that I know of, in terms of explaining things in terms of the Mandela effect, but it could be said that this document may be one of the most important documents in almost all aspects of conspiracy culture, fringe culture, things like that. And
Oh, absolutely. And I think once more people begin to read it and kind of dissect it and analyze it, I think more people will kind of really want to delve into this and kind of go through it with a really fine tooth comb.
absolutely, yeah, it's easily something that I do think entire belief systems are going to be built upon this document. And I think a lot of rearranging of how people see their world is going to happen. And certainly there's going to be a lot of skeptics, and that might think that this is disinfo. But I always go off of my gut, and as soon as I read this thing and got through it, I'm like, no, this is not right. I've disinfo is even the best disinfo is a bit clunky.
Mhm.
This was well thought out, and this was, I presumed. I wonder if they even accidentally released this, and now it's out, and it's too late. I almost feel that way. That's the feeling I get. Like somebody was just, they were supposed to release, 11.1D, and instead of they released like 11.1B or something like that. It happens all the time in computer database programming. It could just be your one keystroke off, and that's it. Something's released that's not supposed to be.
Yeah, that's possible too. I'm not really sure. As to how this got released, that's anybody's guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I want to thank you very, very much for coming on at the last minute like this. I don't know where, I know Kev Baker picked this thing up. He's incredibly respected, incredibly popular. So I don't know how fast this thing is going to pop off, but certainly this thing should and is probably going to pop off. So, and because you are the source, the original researcher, and I wanted to make sure I repeated it over and over again, that you get the absolute all the accolades that you deserve, because you have potentially rearranged the reality of a lot of people in possibly a really wonderful way, in that at least we have more answers, and in that inadvertently or not, we see that we have somewhat of a partner in terms of trying to find out these kinds of things, even if they didn't want to, announce that they were doing the research that we were doing. We still have it, and it doesn't matter. And I'm not going to use ego to point that in a way to say that we got this by, other means. We just, a researcher like yourself just happened to stumble upon it. It doesn't matter. It's here, and we have it now, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, and hopefully we can use this document to further our understanding.
Absolutely. And as we get into it, I think that's going to be the thing. And, Buster, I want to thank you for, choosing me to introduce this to, because you could have probably given this to anyone, and if they ran with it, they would have understood that this is, a major find, and maybe one of the biggest find, at least of this decade, and maybe of the century. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? We'll have to wait and
This
see.
one, I mean, the last one.
And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for having me on, and it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, we're going to jump off here, and who knows when we'll be on next? Things are changing rapidly and very fast. So, I don't know what's going to happen next. It's going too fast. So, all right, everybody. Buster and I are going to jump off, and absolutely, Chick and I, we will be on Saturday, no doubt. So I'll talk to you guys later, and take it easy, and please, please, please read the document. print it out, look at it, or don't print it out, just read it. And certainly get to at least through the parts where it explains that the universe is a hologram and that your brain is a hologram. It'll take you there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.